Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's training on the Summer Reading Corps final report. I'm Justin Ellis, the Director of Development here at Iowa Campus Compact, and I'm going to walk through what the final report looks like. It's a pretty straightforward, and hopefully it doesn't take you a ton of time, and I'll kind of walk you through all the elements of it. It's all online, and it's something that you can pull up here. So I can show you. Excuse me. So this is the report. We use a program called FormStack to collect all of our reports. And this is the link up here. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat box, and you should have that in a email as well. Where is the chat box? For some reason the chat box is not opening for me. So I'll send this here after a bit. But this is what the report looks like. Oh, there it is. So the first page has all the report instructions. This is just kind of everything that's in there. The main sections of the report are the ones that are numbered and in bold right here. So the first part is about AmeriCorps applicants. Then we ask you about beneficiary measures. And then we ask you about the specific measures that are related to what you provided us in your host site application. And then we have some questions about volunteer measures. And then there's a capacity building survey. And for some of you, there will be financial reporting. And I'm just going to walk through what all these sections are. We also at the very bottom have some definitions, so that way you have a clear understanding of what some of the things are that we're talking about here. So like I said, I'm going to kind of walk through what all these different sections are and what we're asking you to put in there. One thing I want to make absolutely certain is that one thing I want to make known to everyone is that if there's something in here that you see that your project and your AmeriCorps members had anything to do with it, you can feel free to put a 0 in there or leave it blank if you're allowed to leave it blank. Specifically, and this is where it usually applies, is around things of like volunteer measures. So if your AmeriCorps members were not recruiting volunteers in any way, that's great. That fits within what you told us that you were going to do, and that's fantastic. And you can just put in 0s for there, and there's no love lost there or anything like that. We would fully expect you to put 0s in there. So, but that's something that we're asking everybody, and everything that's in here is something that we're asking everybody. So that's what the instructions portion of it looks like. The other thing that we ask you for on the first page is your organization, including your name. We ask for your email address in case we have to reach out to you if we have questions. You'll also receive a copy of the report when you provide your email address in here. So select your organization. I'm just going to fill this out. As we go along, I put in Iowa Campus Compact as kind of a dummy organization in here to show you some of the features of how we set this up. So the first section is performance measures. And what we want to know here are just 3 questions. Number of individuals that applied to be AmeriCorps members for your position or all of your positions. Veteran family members that were served and military family members that were served. Likely for these 2, you're probably going to have 0. I don't think we have any projects that we're supporting in that area, but it may have been something that your particular organization was focused on. And if you happen to know that number, that's great. You can share that with us. If you don't happen to know that number, or you didn't do any of that, or you can only speculate that you did that, put in 0s. That's great. That's something that we're asked to report to AmeriCorps. It's not necessarily something that there's a lot of weight put behind, but it's something that they like to share with their representatives, our representatives, about some of the things that the AmeriCorps programs do. The next section, these are the specific measures for your particular organization. So here I have just some dummy ones for Iowa Campus Compact. But whatever you told us as your output and your outcome, whether it's one of the ones that you selected that was off of our list, or it was one of the ones that you wrote in specific to your organization, That information will be listed right up here, up top in the instructions area, and then the questions will obviously be the same thing. And you can provide that information. You can provide whatever it is success that you had in those particular outputs and outcomes. But this is what you provided us in your host site application. And then we do ask you to provide any additional brief context on how your organization verifies your reported outputs and outcomes. So if you have a list that you go through, or you collect the number of individuals, you record that when there's a sign-in sheet or something like that, whatever that might be, that would be the type of thing that we're looking for. So we'll just put in sign-in sheet. The next section is all about volunteer measures. So we ask just 5 questions. We're asking about the number of ongoing volunteers recruited, and episodic volunteers who recruited, and then similarly for managed, and then the hours that they had served. So the 3 big things categories that are in here are recruited, managed, and then hours. The difference between a recruited volunteer and a managed volunteer is that a managed volunteer receives some sort of assistance from the AmeriCorps member or your organization. So they receive some sort of training, or you put together the service project that they were doing. For most people, for most organizations reporting on this, most of your volunteers are going to be considered managed, because a recruited volunteer is where the AmeriCorps member or a staff member at your organization recruits someone for a position, and then they go off to maybe another nonprofit, and then they volunteer their time there, and you have no idea what they're actually doing. You're not actually training them, you're not putting together the service project or anything like that. So for most organizations, you're going to put down managed. If you do any sort of recruiting, it's likely that the individuals are managed. AmeriCorps also asks us to separate volunteers into excuse me, ongoing or episodic. And ongoing are volunteers who are folks who kind of keep on coming back to your organization. Maybe they do an event here, then they do an event there, and they're kind of continually in your pool of volunteers. Your episodic volunteers are really folks that you just see once, and then you really don't expect to see ever again. So this tends to vary by organization depending on the type of recruitment that they do for volunteers, as well as the type of service projects that they have out there. But just note those are the types of things that we're asking you to report on. And in here, you'll see, you'll enter in the number, and then this will give us the total number of recruited volunteers. We added that in there. I added that in there in part for my benefit, because that's something that to save me a step on doing math, because that's something that I have to report on when I submit my reports directly to AmeriCorps. So there's just some dummy information in there for that. And then again, we ask you volunteer measure context. Just how do you collect that? Maybe you have a volunteer. Maybe you have some volunteer tracking software that you use, or you maybe use a spreadsheet, or maybe something else. Then the next section of the report is the capacity building survey, and this is where we're asking you to think a little bit more in depth about what it is that the member or members provided to your organization, perhaps how they improved or worked on projects that could down the line improve your organization's capacity. So this is for Iowa Campus Compact. This is where you kind of fit into our performance measure for the grant. So what we're hoping to do with the program overall is just to build capacity of organizations out in the community through our AmeriCorps positions. And so there's a couple different categories here. This one is program and services, and then all the check marks right here. These are areas in which your AmeriCorps members could contribute to your organization. They might have not. and that's okay if they didn't, and that's great if they do. But for each one that you do select, there will be a little uh, text box that shows up. And what we're asking you to do is just to put in a brief description of any projects that your AmeriCorps members have contributed to or have completed that has helped your organization in that specific area. So they don't have to be things that they actually completed. They can be things that might be completed a year down the line. But we're just asking for a brief description of what that looks like. And maybe this is something that, this is something you can type in real quick, or maybe this is something that comes off of their specific position description. However you feel that works to complete that task is kind of up to you, but just know that we're just looking for something really brief. We're not looking for paragraphs of information. So I'm just going to put in task. So just some dummy information for that one. The next category is staff and leadership development. I wouldn't expect that maybe a lot of our AmeriCorps members did anything in this area, but if they did, it might be under managing volunteers more effectively, perhaps. A lot of our members weren't actually doing any sort of volunteer recruitment, but if they did, that might be the area. So they were developing volunteers, giving them professional development or something like that. The next area is in record keeping. So maybe this was an improvement for your particular program or your particular organization, and AmeriCorps members helped out in one of these ways. If they did, that's great. If they didn't, again, that's, we're not expecting members to do everything in all these areas. We do ask you about higher education partnerships. If our AmeriCorps members helped you better partner with any higher ed partners in any specific or broad ways. So we're just asking about that as a particular area of interest for us. And then the last part of this capacity building survey is just an open text box where you can provide any sort of other projects or other contributions the AmeriCorps member may be provided that we didn't necessarily think of in the survey. Or maybe your members just did strictly direct service and they really didn't build any capacity, and that's okay. That was allowable as part of the summer program. We're just trying to capture what some of those things are in just a little bit more detail. So let me just go back. So for those of you who, for most people filling out this form, this will be the last thing that you see. If you are a site that is providing me with timesheets right now, or you chose to pay additional cost share as match for the program, then you won't fill out the financial part of it, which is the next page that I'm going to show. But for organizations where you said in your host site application that you're able to provide receipts of supplies or other sorts of purchases or other financial documentation of your summer program as a source of match for the program, then you'll see the next one. So this is just for the sites that selected that option or renegotiated that option at some point. So this is what it looks like. It's hopefully pretty straightforward. Really, we're just asking for kind of three things. We want you to list what the item or items are that you purchased. Briefly describe how they supported your summer AmeriCorps program. So how are they connected to what your AmeriCorps members did, or how did they support your AmeriCorps members in being able to accomplish the tasks that you had set out for them? And then attach any sort of relevant receipts or invoices or anything like that. So those are the three things that we're asking you to fill out right there. So again, briefly describe what that item or purchase is, describe how it's connected to your AmeriCorps project, and attach any receipts. You'll also see right here that I provided what you put on your host site application as what you said that you were able to provide. Now you can certainly deviate from this. Maybe you didn't list books and materials for the summer literacy program, but that was something that happened to have occurred over the summer. That's great. You're welcome to provide those as a source of match for the program. All that we ask you, again, is just to fill out these three things. And there are more opportunities. So if you happen to have 3 receipts or more receipts than that, you certainly can fill out all 3 of these. Or you can also send them to me directly. My email's right there jdllis@compact.org. So what might this look like when you fill it out? So a brief description of the item of purchase. I mean, this can be as simple and clear as books for summer program. So that's the description of the book. How are they supported, or how did they support our AmeriCorps project? We could say AmeriCorps members use books, read books to K through 6 readers. So you could write something as simple as that, and then you would just attach a copy of the receipt for all the books that you purchased. So, I don't need the actual receipts or anything like that. Obviously, just copies of it is perfect. And yeah, and so then there's 3 spots where you can attach things. If you need to send more, you can always send them directly to my email address. Happy to collect them from that way. And then you just submit the form, and then you'll get a copy of it in your email inbox, and I'll receive a copy of it as confirmation that you submitted it. And if you have questions, you can always follow up with me, but that's what the form looks like in a nutshell. I'm going to go back to the main page here. And if you have questions about anything, I'm certainly able to answer them. Happy to answer anything that you might have questions on right now. So one thing I am going to do is I am going to stop recording this, and then I'll answer any questions.